Hi guys, this is Gad Saad. This conversation came up in a very impromptu manner given the events that are unfolding before our eyes. Today I have BJ Dichter, who is a spokesperson and an organizer for the Freedom Convoy. These are the truckers who came from out west to Ottawa that were so extremist that they sent me into hiding underneath the table. And he is one of their organizers. So I'm presuming that I'm safe in speaking to you, BJ?
I guess so, and I'm assuming Justin Trudeau is hiding under the desk with you,
He
isn't he?
he is, and I have to say that given that we're both hiding under the desk, the close proximity is making me a bit attracted to him. It's making me question my commitment to my wife, but that's a discussion for another day. All right, so much to talk about. Thanks for coming on. I really appreciate it. Tell us first, what is the Freedom Convoy about? What are the demands, just so that people can wade between the nonsense that's being spewed about the Freedom Convoy and the reality. Take it away.
The short version is we're looking for two things, which are end the mandates, the vaccine mandates, and remove the passport or the vaccine passport, or as I call it, the Stasi passport, for trying to re-enter Canada. That's the simple. That's the simple request. That's all we want to do.
Okay, so all the other stuff we won't leave until Trudeau resigns, and all the other stuff that we're reading, that's not part of the official demands that the Freedom Convoy is seeking to establish.
No, it's not surprising there are quite a few enthusiastic people involved in the convoy who tend to lash out and talk more about, from the heart and their emotion. But from a pragmatic and strategic perspective, no, we're looking to remove the mandates and remove it's called the Arrive Can app. And I told a story, I'll tell it just briefly
Sure.
here on Glenn Beck, because I'm sure you have some insight into this. The very first time I used it was last week, and I drove up to the border and I pulled my phone out to give to the border agent along with all my paperwork and my passport and whatever. And he says, "Oh, no, I don't need to see your COVID passport." And I said, "What do you mean you don't need to see it?" He said, "Oh, we can detect your phone, that it's when a certain proximity of the booth, so we know who you are, and all your information data comes up on the screen and it's correlated with that passport."
Wow.
And
Go ahead.
and I just, it occurred to me at that point, like, well, if they're just doing that on the border, how difficult is it going to be to expand that to urban centers across the country without us even knowing? And that's what China has.
Exactly right. I think I saw you make that exact point on Tucker Carlson at the time.
Yeah.
It had frozen me. I couldn't believe it. I mean, isn't I don't know what the term of this law or governmental rule, isn't it that different branches of government cannot speak to each other precisely because you don't want to have a central authority that is able to kind of amalgamate everything against you? And by the anecdote that you shared, that is exactly what is happening.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it depends on the perspective of who you say doesn't want that,
Right.
right? There's certain people who might. And was interesting? Like, this is my regular phone. I would never put that spyware in my regular phones. I have a separate phone just for the passport and an email address I never use, nothing traceable, separate account. So it doesn't even have a SIM card in it. Yet it's still connected to the booth because I was logged into the Wi-Fi in my truck. So even with just the Wi-Fi, not connected to the cellular network, it still detected me. It's
Wow.
crazy.
That is a bit creepy. Now, how did this whole Freedom Convoy start? What was the genesis? How did it unfold? Maybe you could tell us a bit about the historical trajectory of this movement.
It started with a couple of truckers in Alberta, Bridget and Chris, who are friends of Tamara, who's a friend of mine. And they had this idea. They said, we're fed up. Bridget was going to lose her job, as were many people in the sector. So they decided, screw it, let's do a convoy and let's go to Ottawa like we did a couple of years ago, but let's make this the convoy of all convoys because this is our last chance. If we don't stop this now, the downward slide of Canada is going to continue into extreme authoritarianism. And then we're going to have what Australia has, quarantine camps and all this sort of nonsense. So they started it, and within a few hours, it started getting donations. Tamara set up a GoFundMe, and I don't know, the next morning, Tamara called me and said, "Listen, we started this GoFundMe yesterday, and it's exploding. Please help. Come on board. Come join me. I need help with messaging and all that sort of stuff." And I said, "Okay, I'm on board." So then we started to grow, and more people got involved, and they started building a team. I mean, those people are really good in terms of logistics and building a convoy, communications amongst the team, and all the rural communities that are driving across. And then it was the most organic grassroots thing I've seen in my life to grow to this scale.
Wow. Now, in of course, when one reads the mainstream media, as I did in trying to prepare for our chat that just happened today, we scheduled.
Why would you do that to yourself? Why would you
Because
subject yourself to
because I wanted to be able to hear what they have to say so that we can contextualize that to what's happening. So if you read that, if I don't know you, if I don't know some of the people who are part of the Freedom Convoy, so here's what I heard from the mainstream media, or
Okay, give it to me.
yeah. So
we're racist, it's Islamophobes, whatever.
Exactly. It was basically Justin Trudeau strongly supports the right for people to protest, but of course he doesn't support division and hate and misinformation and bigots and so on. So, what ends up happening in these kinds of situations is you have a million people there, and then someone has some symbol that is less than ideal for the message that you're trying to convey, and you don't even know if the person who is engaging in that signal is a plant or not. I don't mean to be conspiratorial, but one never knows. And then you just have to find one person who has some execrable position, and then you can feather and tar a million people as being all racists and Nazis. Do you think that most Canadians understand that strategy from the mainstream media, or do you think that most are falling prey to that kind of propaganda?
I think more and more people, we've seen them waking up over the past while. I think the Kyle Rittenhouse judgment was a big one. And I think that's even amongst people who are centrist or even, center left, are starting to have extreme scrutiny towards the media. And I think the media is going to be the biggest victim of all of this. So when I was on stage yesterday, I addressed a couple of the controversies. Have you ever seen the movie Wag the Dog? Those are your controversies.
Oh, this is where they pretend that there is a war that's about to happen or something? Is that the movie? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So the one of the controversies was, and they keep referring it in the fake news CBC, which is what I tell them to their faces, and they don't like it.
Right.
In the fake news CBC, they referred to it as the Terry Fox incident.
Right.
You know what the Terry Fox incident was?
Go.
Somebody put a Bristol board on the Terry Fox statue under his arm that said "Mandate Freedom" and a Canadian flag. Wow, the controversy,
right?
The hate, right?
Right.
They also complained about the incident at the War Memorial where somebody parked their truck on the War Memorial, where what they did is they parked their truck in the exact same spot that the media parks in during events in that area during Memorial Day. So I think they're upset that one of our trucks took their parking spot. I think that's what they're most upset about. And it's blatant, just fake news. Even when they said, our GoFundMe, they did this thing. The Toronto Star, the CBC put out some stories saying that the GoFundMe has been frozen and we can't access the accounts. And we knew that. And some people asked me, let's do a press release. I said, no. Let them do it. Let them sink themselves. Because once the funds are going to be released, because they do have this protocol, especially for large dollar amounts, international banking regulations, AML laws, all that sort of stuff. We had to get our lawyer and accountant, all that stuff on our team put together to get all the paperwork sorted out. That takes time. It ended up taking 10 days, and it usually takes 7 to 10 days. So while they were writing this story, the Toronto Star released it saying it's been frozen for nefarious reasons. I called Tamara. I said, by any chance, is it frozen? She said, no, I just got off the phone with them an hour ago. They're great.
Wow.
the state of our media.
What are the, since we're talking about the funds, what is the strategy in terms, or the trajectory of how these funds are going to be used?
The idea is it's for the cost of the journey and all costs associated with it. So, fuel, food, lodging for some people, that sort of stuff. Like the money's not for us. It's just for the truckers. And there's a lot of, ancillary costs associated with that, and depends on how long they're going to be there. So trucks are interesting in that they are pretty much self-sustaining for long periods of time, because you essentially have a house attached to it.
Right.
You have a fridge, a kitchen, all that sort of stuff. You just need to keep it fueled, and if you have an APU attached to it, you can sit there for a couple of weeks and not have to refuel, or even longer, depending on how you use it. So we just want to make sure all those costs are covered. And also there's a spectrum of truckers. There's the younger guys who are just paying off their truck. It's their first truck. And then there are others that have been owner operators for 20 years. They're close to retirement. They don't need it quite as badly. And a lot of them have said, I'm volunteering my time. I don't need the money. Let's take care of the other guys who really need it. There's a lot of that going on. So our team that's on the ground there is just trying to decipher who's who, who needs what, and all that sort of stuff.
But while of course, there's the visual of sort of the trucker convoy coming down, barreling down from out west to Ottawa, to the capital. The fight that you are undertaking is not one that is largely restricted to trucker world, right? I mean, you're fighting for having Canadians, whether they are neurosurgeons or pet groomers, being free from the current sort of authoritarian, because I think a lot of people are wrongly presuming, without thinking that you're racist and bigots and so on. A lot of people are thinking that this is somehow strictly related to concerns of truckers, whereas your fight is actually a much bigger one, correct?
Exactly. A couple of things. Firstly, there's not one convoy. It started that way, but then we had a convoy coming from the Maritimes. We had 2 or 3 separate convoys coming from Quebec, coming from Northern Ontario, and then everybody split up because, to take a right turn in Manitoba, there was like a 5-hour wait. So a bunch of them turn around, go the other direction, go up across 3 highways. So it just got all segmented and split up because Canada's highway infrastructure could not handle the number of trucks. That's how overloaded it was.
Right.
And now we just found out about 10 minutes ago, there is a convoy stuck at one of the borders in the U.S. trying to get in, and it's so long that it's basically shut the border. Wow. It's going to take hours and hours to process these American trucks coming up.
So let's drill down with, the idea that you're trying to get rid of the mandate. So what, if every single one of the demands were met, what would it look like? Where would we be? If Trudeau came along and said, okay, every single one of your demands are going to be implemented as of next Monday, what would that look like?
Well, essentially, if we had to put it down to one word, and this is the most used word, is freedom or liberté, which is right. Great. For the first time, you're seeing Albertans and Quebecers hanging out together. And for those of you who don't know Canada, that is very unusual. It's the first time in our country's history that we're seeing them not go at each other's throats and calling each other's name and tabarnak and this,
right.
There is a lot of animosity historically, and that seems to have gone by the wayside at this point. I think what you would see is we would turn back at least to the world that it was before 2019, before COVID, because you would see a lack of restrictions, no more, face diapers.
Right.
I would say the only people who should be wearing face diapers are politicians because of the amount of manure that comes out of their mouth.
Right.
Particularly our transportation minister, who's caused all of this, by the way. This is his file. And so I think we would get back at least to some level of civility. That's what we're looking at. There's going to be so much destruction that's been caused by all of this, and started well before COVID. I told the story of when I went there out west to Saskatchewan and Alberta just before COVID. That's 6 months before COVID. And it already looked like it had been turned into a third world country because they turned off the entire energy sector. It scared me. It was right. Really creepy. So we're going to go back to that, but at least that's a step in the right direction. And that shows that the Liberal Party wanted Justin Trudeau to be a global brand. Well, guess what? They got their wish.
Right, right. I mean, as you know, I'm not sure if you've had a chance to read my last book, the Parasitic Mind. I discuss all of the idea pathogens that result in the outcome called Justin Trudeau, because Justin Trudeau is a walking manifestation of each and every one of the idea pathogens that I cover in my book. And I don't think it's because he is innately diabolical, because he's a product of the educational milieu that he grew up in. And so if you are parasitized by all of these dreadful ideas, then you implement policies that are in accordance with those ideologies. So, which of the various idea pathogens, which you may not remember what they are, so let me just mention them: postmodernism, militant feminism, cultural relativism, social constructivism, all of these idea pathogens result in downstream effects in public policy. Which of these dreadful ideas do you think is driving the lunacy and the authoritarianism associated with the COVID mandates?
I would suggest all of them.
Okay.
The What's interesting before I answer that question is, some of us know a lot of these people in office. We have some connections in the parties and stuff. And one of the things a journalist who I know who covers politics across Canada said to me over the phone, he talks to liberals. He's not adversarial towards them. He said to me, I can tell you, because I've had conversations with people in the party, if it were up to Justin, he would be right now causing a disturbance and trying to escalate this. He wants that. That's what he's looking for. And that's why they told him, Justin, go away. We'll take care of this. We're just going to sit it out. So he's far more aggressive than people realize. At least that's what I'm being told. And that is not unusual from what I've been told in the past. So of the idea pathogens, I think the whole philosophical worldview of postmodernism and cultural relativism are two things that he doesn't even understand. That's what he is. And that's really scary.
Have you been able in the few days since this has really taken off, have you been able to make meaningful contact, to start some, productive dialogue with relevant members in the government, or has it been completely stifled off that, you're there, they're there, nobody's talking to one another?
Despite the various politicians trying to virtue signal around some of the truckers, nobody we have not spoken with or met with any politician. We have not spoken or met with any member of mainstream media. So everything that you're hearing from them is completely fabricated or their interpretation of what's going on. So when you see a politician sitting in front of the truckers saying, I'm with the truckers and the truckers want A, B, C, or D, they have no clue because they haven't spoken to any of us. And that's intentional. So we're just sitting there and we're waiting.
So
we got all the time in the world.
So how do you think this plays out? Like, give me a sense of various trajectories and where this can go. So how long are you willing to wait it out? What if they never agree to meet you? Do you just sit there through the cold winter and hope that spring comes quicker, or what's the trajectory look like?
Well, I think with the number of trucks that we have and the number of trucks that continue to flow into the region, I think you're going to see, as the city gets disrupted, the people who live there, and we've told them we can't promise your lives are not going to be disrupted, and hopefully you understand why. There's going to become a choking point, where resources are going to start to become very scarce. And the government is going to have to act because people within the city of Ottawa are going to demand that something be done, right? The interesting thing as well about trucks is, unlike having a sit-in or a protest, it's mobile.
Right.
So with a truck, you don't necessarily have to sit in one spot to cause massive disruptions that can have a ripple effect all the way outside of the city. So we have a number of different strategies. And the number one thing is we all have lots of time on our hands. And also, because there's so many trucks, some of them need to go out and work. Like, they still need to work a little bit. They may be able to take a pay cut to participate. So there are trucks who've, branched off from the convoy, who live, locally in Ontario, Quebec, whatever, that are going out for 2, 3 days, 4 days, doing a couple of runs and coming back, and to relieve people who are doing, the sit-in shift now. And there will be a constant rotation. So we can keep this going forever if we really want to.
I'm going to ask you next to speculate, so I know that you don't have a definitive answer to this, but I've recently asked this question of several guests, and I'm curious to know what your opinion is. So if I were to tell you, BJ, look, there are two possible explanations as to why governments in general and Canadian government in particular are doing what they're doing. Because I mean, Canada is in a unique situation in that in the severity of the mandates and the lockdowns, we're at the more severe end of things, right? Whereas yesterday in the championship games in the NFL, there are 70,000 people huddled over top of one each other in Kansas City or in LA. We're still until yesterday under lockdown and curfew. It's only today that they opened up the restaurants and the cafes. It's been over a month in Quebec. So we tend to score on the high end of the severity of the lockdowns. So here are the two factors that I want you to tell me which one you think is more operative. So factor one would be, look, all of these governments ultimately are trying to come up with public policy decisions in a very complex world using some kind of ad hoc seat of the pant, methodology. They get things wrong. And so it's largely due to ineptitude, but it's innocent ineptitude, number one. Number two, more nefarious, more sinister. No, this is so there are two types of sinister explanations. I'll lump them together for now. It's the Davos globalist, this is an opportunity for the Great Reset, or it is more localized. It is an opportunity for each national government to use this disaster to take greater control. And so if I ask you to allocate 100 points of weight to these two, so for example, if you think the first one is 70 points, the second one is 30, how would you allocate how much of these two factors are driving what we're seeing?
Well, I think I would argue the points vary. So the points that would be attributed to somebody like Justin Trudeau will have more weight to everybody else, let's say in the Liberal Party. Okay. And I have a good friend who was very much part of the Liberal Party for many years. And he shortly after Justin got elected, he realized he was sold a bag of goods. And I make fun of him every single day that I see him for him and say, thank you for this. So I think it's a combination of multiple things. There are people within political parties, the Liberal Party, they'll just go along to get along because they want opportunity, political opportunity, or a future in politics, and they tend to be the younger ones. But then you have Justin Trudeau is kind of an airhead. He doesn't. This is from a very senior official within the Liberal Party who explained this to us. He has no involvement. I've been trying to tell this people this forever. He has no idea. He has no idea what. He doesn't watch the news. He's kept completely isolated. He doesn't make policy decisions. He had no interest in politics. So what they've done, if they decided he's going to be, and he let it slip one time, the relationships manager. So he's the actor. They want to go say something. They say, Justin, talk about A, B, and C. And he goes and does it. That's why it seems so incongruent. He'll talk about things in a time that just make no sense and anger people because he has no idea. Now, the team around him, his best friend, Jerry Butts, he essentially runs everything with Katie Telford, Omar Alghabra, Navdeep Bains. They are the ones who is no longer there. And Eric Hoskins is now the new replacement. So he is just a mascot. We're dealing with a team of authoritarians who are not only authoritarian, but opportunist. I would argue that Jerry Butts is an extremist, which is why Trudeau comes off as an extremist. He just tells them, go here, do that, say this. I got your back, brother, because they're best friends.
But extremist along which ideology? What's the purpose of whatever it is that they're trying to institute on the Canadian public? What is the ultimate goal?
Collectivist ideology.
Okay.
Right? And that does align with the goals of, Klaus Schwab, which I jokingly say, well, for the third time, we have a left-wing German who's going to save the world. What could go wrong, right? And our finance minister is on the board of the World Economic Forum, as is Andrew Scheer, the former leader of the Conservative Party, as is Michelle Rempel, an MP who I used to be good friends with.
Yeah, she's been on my show. Yes.
Yeah, and then she went to Davos, and then she came back and started apologizing for being a cisgendered white female.
I did see that. That did surprise me, yes.
She's crazy. So, much like Lenin took over by propping up the degenerates, and then Mao took over by propping up the degenerates, we live in a society where these people globally are trying to institute policy, so it seems, to prop up the degenerates and cause conflict. And politicians will go where the donations money for their campaigns are. That's how it works. That's how they buy the influence. It's not like in the movies, there's a bag of money. That's not how it works. It's donations to campaigns and opportunities to sit on boards of companies. That's what they're getting.
Wow. Now, as you know, BJ, because you've known me for many years, I hate to sort of toot my own horn, but I was one of the early guys who repeatedly warned the world about Justin Trudeau before he became prime minister. And I famously went on several high-profile shows, most notably on Joe Rogan, where I talked about Justin Trudeau and how. So I'm well aware about some of the psychological reasons that drove people to vote for an empty vessel, a vacuous pile of garbage. As a matter of fact, a few days ago, I put out a tweet. You may or may not have seen it. There's an expression in Arabic, and many people ask me to explain how phonetically you say it. So I'll say it here since you can actually hear me pronounce it. In Arabic, there's an expression that says bela ta'me. Bela ta'me means someone who has no substance, no taste. No, right? They're so vacuous. They're such an empty sack of platitudes that you couldn't taste them, right? It's a really powerful Arabic is a very powerful language, and so bela ta'me refers to Justin Trudeau. But let me ask you, since you've been involved in Canadian politics beyond what's happening now with the Freedom Convoy, you've been at it for many years, and you have insider knowledge. What do you think explains the fact that Canadians weren't hoodwinked once, weren't hoodwinked twice, but were hoodwinked 3 times? Now, I understand it was a minority of Canadians. That's our parliamentary system. But nonetheless, 3 times, this utter empty suit has been able to sit as Prime Minister of Canada. Is it something endemically wrong with Canadians that we keep making the same mistake? And when I say we, I don't mean you or me. I mean Canadians collectively.
No, it's because there's no opposition. So you have your main parties for those people who are not in Canada. The NDP, the Liberal Party, and the Conservative Party. It's really the Conservative Party and the Liberal Party are the only ones that have a chance to ever get an election. The NDP is there as a tool for the other parties to swing votes in other directions. But what's happened is the Conservative Party, my party, who I would never vote for right now, by the way, and didn't vote for in the last election and the election before that, they have been doing their very best to chase Communist Justin off a cliff. And I remember having a strategy meeting with them several years ago. And I said to them, like, if you want to go this direction and you want to be more, as I worded it, libertarian on social issues,
right,
I'm with you. But don't chase them off a cliff. That's exactly what they've done. The reason they've done that is because the same lobby firm that controls the Liberal Party also controls the Conservative Party now. So look at it this way. This particular firm, this is one of them, but there's only a small number of them. This particular firm I'm thinking of, it was co-founded by 2 people, 4 people, 2 are Conservatives, and the other 2 are Katie Telford and Rob Silver. Katie Telford is Justin Trudeau's chief of staff. So her lobby firm is controlling the Conservative Party in terms of, not authoritarian control, but policy directives and think tanks and university studies and all this nonsense that you see in universities. When the urban planning department comes with a study, for a think tank that says 109% of Canadians want bicycle lanes in the middle of rural Alberta. No, we have the data. We can show the polling, right? Well, that makes its way up the chain to these lobby firms who then help turn that into public policy. And nobody in this mechanism has the wisdom, the moral will, and the moral skill to say, wait, that doesn't sound right.
Right.
And so they're all vacuous. Aaron O'Toole is just a bald, ugly version of Justin Trudeau.
Right. But actually, go ahead. Finish your point.
Much like we like to joke that Justin Trudeau's an airhead, Aaron O'Toole is known in the legal community as an airhead. That's why he never made it in the legal community. That's why he went into politics.
I was going to say that, and I hate to say this because it's disconcerting what I'm about to say. And I've actually written scientific papers on this. Look, most people use simplifying heuristics when they're choosing between political candidates. And what I mean by that is that while you would like to think that when we're choosing something as consequential as who's going to lead our country, we're looking at all of the policies and we're weighing them and we're looking at each candidate on where they fall on monetary policy and fiscal policy and immigration policy, most people don't do 1/1,000,000th of that. They rely on what are called peripheral cues. So, for example, in chapter 2 of the Parasitic Mind, when I talk about thinking versus feeling, so Justin Trudeau appeals to me. I'm speaking now as the average, naturally lobotomized Canadian who voted for him. Justin Trudeau is tall. He's young. He looks sweet. By the way, on my Facebook page, my personal Facebook page, if you saw the number of middle-aged female professors who were saying things about him, which if a male professor had said about a female candidate, they would have been canceled. But it was perfectly okay for those female professors to say how dreamy he was. So as the average Trudeau voter, I don't have to go through the burdensome task of worrying about what his policies are. He just looks young, vibrant, cool, hip, and therefore that's good enough for me. I'm going to say something else that it might sound as though I'm being facetious, but I'm not. Most people say liberal sounds right. I'm a liberal person. Conservative sounds old school. I don't like homophobia. Conservatives are all racist homophobics. It's at that level of thinking that most people operate. So is there a way for us to convince people that the decisions that you make when you go to the ballot box have to be taken more seriously? Because otherwise, tomorrow there'll be another Justin Trudeau that comes along, just like there was Joe Biden, just like there was Kamala Harris, just like there was Barack Obama. Remember, Barack Obama, to all of my super progressive smart colleagues, he is fantastic because he is tall, he is thin, he's lanky, he has a mellifluous voice, he speaks with the cadence of a Southern Baptist minister. Every single syllable he utters is a platitude sack of shit, but my God, is he intoxicating and alluring. On the other hand, Donald Trump, with whom I might agree on every single one of the substantive policies, I detest him. He's disgusting. He's an ogre. He's vulgar. He's fat. He's cantankerous. So I think therein lies the problem. It's the psychological weakness of people not being able to allocate the right cognitive resources to make the right decision. What are your thoughts?
I think you're completely right. I have a friend. He's one of the 3 people at the CBC with a functioning brain. And it's very interesting to hear the stories he tells me of what goes on in there. Like, for example, they have instructions how to use the washroom now during COVID. Right. If you're in this, I can send you a picture of this. If you're in the stall and somebody walks in the washroom, there's instructions on the back door of the stall. If somebody walks in, you're not permitted to leave the stall until that other person leaves the washroom.
Wow.
That's the ridiculousness of these people, right? So yeah, I think there's people are, you would know more than anybody. People do not make decisions based on data or information. People make decisions based on their emotions. And my friend at the CBC, the reason I tell you that story, I asked him once, I said, let me ask you about white privilege. Now, we all know Prime Minister Blackface identifies as African American. We know
Exactly.
that. But he's actually white. So why does he get away with it? And he said, "Oh, he's attractive." What do you mean? He's attractive. If you're attractive, it's okay. You can be white and be attractive. That's fine. The minute you're not, then you're the scum of the earth. I said, "Really? That's what you think?" He said, "Yeah." That's the nature of now. What's the cure? I don't know, but I have some ideas. I think I suggested to you once that I have hope because we're entering, I think, the golden age where the academics, the intelligent people in this world, like yourself, Stephen Higgs, Jordan Peterson, Scott Adams, are building huge platforms. And what do you do? What are you guys doing? You're educating the regular person in disciplines they would never have access to. So, for the example of truckers, like there's the reputation of the trucker that's hardened, not intellectual, whatever. Some of those guys are quite bright.
Oh,
They
yes.
spend a lot of time in their trucks, relaxing, watching YouTube, and you know what? They watch people like you, and they're learning. So I think the more we go down this path, and people like I am a big fan of Scott Adams. Why? He's teaching people how to think.
Yep.
He's talking to people that disagree with him. He's saying, "I know you disagree with me on this. This is why you disagree. This is my perspective. We can disagree and move on." And that's what we're going back to. So I do think we are on the cusp of that golden age. We just got to get there. And it starts with getting people like Trudeau and others like him out of the political system and out of the media. And the media is no better, right?
Right.
And I gave the example with CBC.
I've often said this, but it's worth repeating, given that I'm talking right here with a spokesperson of the Truckers Convoy. One of the things that excites me the most literally thousands and thousands of messages that I receive in a given week or a given month, sometimes in a given day, are the emails of appreciation from, quote, the great unwashed, from the rubes,
Yeah.
from the
Yeah.
from the deplorables, because there is an authenticity to them that
Mm-hmm.
regrettably I don't find in many of my academic colleagues. And I don't mean to frivolously denigrate my colleagues. Of course they are wonderful colleagues that I have, but in general I've noticed that many of my colleagues are truly believe that they are the anointed class, that they, and that's why many of them don't like to. I mean, many of them, if you contacted them the way you were kind enough to reach out to me, would say, "Well, why should I talk to this guy?" Whereas for me, on the contrary, I think, if I may speak of myself, one of my appeals is precisely that I don't exude that
That's right.
aura, right? And so when I receive an email from a corrections officer, from an army ranger, from a Navy SEAL, from a trucker, I'm actually more excited that I was able to reach them than if I reached a guy at Stanford. Even though last week I was invited and I spoke at Stanford remotely. So there is an authenticity to the guys who are delivering our foods, who are protecting us from the bad guys, and so on. And that if you can find the message as an academic to reach such a large swath of people, then I think you're onto something. And so,
When I was with one of the people I was with yesterday was Tom Quiggin, one of my podcasters,
yes.
and he said it best. He said, "My dad always taught me growing up, every person in this world knows something you don't.
Oh,
Might be something small,
yeah,
right? But they
yeah.
know something you don't, and you can learn from everybody."
Exactly right. And one of the things that makes me turned off about someone when I speak to them is when so look, if you look at Joe Rogan, one of the reasons that he became a success that he is because he's a good conversationalist. Whether you like him, you don't like him, you like his positions, he gives you a forum whereby he brings a whole range of people, and then he's got the epistemic humility to step back and listen. Yeah, of course, sometimes he can weigh in and say the wrong things, but he listens. Whereas I'll tell you, I've got family members in my own family, my nuclear family, not my wife and kids, but my family of birth, where some of those folks will lecture a cardiologist about the heart, will lecture a dentist about the teeth, will lecture a professor, right? So they'll talk down to me as though I was a lobotomized moron who is borderline failing grade 1 math. They know better than you in everything. That to me is one of the ugliest possible traits. Because exactly as you said, one of the things that I love about bringing guests on is I know that I'm going to learn tons of stuff. One of the things that I love about my study is that there are all these books that I've yet to read. And if only I could magically have the necessary time to read all that knowledge that I still don't know, my God, would be great. So epistemic humility is at the core of intellectual curiosity.
100%. I personally am addicted to, like, I made a deal with myself when I was 16 years old. If I'm ever going to watch TV, it's not as the idiot box. Anything I watch, I'm going to learn.
Yeah.
Whether it's Discovery Channel or it doesn't matter. I just got addicted to it. And it's amazing how that can expand your life. Just, reading books, things you never dreamed or had interest in. You read about it and then boom, that becomes a new interest. And that goes on the list for next year of something to get into.
Gotcha.
And I that's what the internet has also given us, right? So I have hope.
One or two last questions. We were going to go much less time, but we ended up going much. I hope that you're okay in terms of time. I want to come back to the truckers convoy for just a minute or two to kind of wrap it up. The demographics of the folks in question cover everything, right? We've got conservatives, we've got liberals, we've got gay people, straight people, people of color, white people, people who are for vaccine, people who don't, right? There isn't some homogeneous archetype of what constitutes members of the truckers convoy. Is that correct?
That's right. You have people, all Canadians, who've been locked in their homes for 2 years, who are fed up and they just want to taste freedom. And I explained that on one of the interviews I did. I walked to the Quebec border, that bridge behind
Sure.
the Parliament building, and it was amazing. I'll always remember this moment. I walked back with them doing the pilgrimage into Ontario, surrounded completely by Quebecers, many of them who didn't speak any English, into Ontario for them to meet their Albertan and Prairie brothers from Canada, almost for the first time. That unification that Canada never really experienced, because that's what happens when the media and politicians get out of the way.
Beautiful.
And we see people with, the kind of hippie peace and love signs because we're trying to send that message. Everything to, Christian pastors, all sorts of, it's amazing. The entire Sikh community has come out in mass, and they're not exactly friends of Jagmeet Singh as well, which is hysterical. To say that I'm part of the truckers, I came here for freedom. We had a video from a Muslim truck driver, I think he's Pakistani, yesterday, that we put up, and he said, I came to Canada for freedom, to be a Canadian, to be amongst all of you and to love all of you and all that sort of stuff. And I've been frustrated to see what's been happening to my country. And I'm glad to see, a message of unity. It's been beautiful. It's really, for all of us, has been heart-wrenching sometimes and really difficult to look at.
May this be the tipping point that returns us back to the beautiful Canada that I was lucky enough to come to in 1975. Keep up your fantastic work, BJ. Please make sure that it doesn't divulge in any way into violence, because we want to win this battle of ideas peacefully and not through violence. But I'm sure you already know this. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Stay on the line so we could say goodbye officially. And if there's any way, guys, that you'd like to support this endeavor, I will put a link at the bottom of the description of this clip, and then you can support the endeavor in any way that you can. Thank you so much, BJ.
Thank you, God.
Cheers.